Thanking our sponsor for the month, the Durbach Abudi and a Mandel families, in honor of the engagement of Shaul Harris to Meir Mandel. May they build a Bayis Neman, be Yisrael filled with Torah, Simcha, and Bracha. And Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored for Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi. Thank you very much for that. B'schus Refuah Shlema for Chana Bas Bruya. Okay, we are in midst a machlokas, and I'm not sure, we may be reviewing a little bit from yesterday, but the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva in their understanding of the pasuk that talks about who a ben Noach who is not allowed to have a relationship with. So it says Aviv and Imo, right? It says Aviv and Imo, and Rabbi Eliezer learned that it was Aviv Domel li Imo, that we're going to take those and say, since Aviv and Imo are in the same pasuk, we're going to say that the two mean the same thing. Now, obviously, you cannot have a relationship with your father in the same way. As we said, that couldn't mean that because that would already be covered from prohibition of Mishkav Zachar, of homosexual relations. So he said, well, it must mean the sister of the father, and since it means the sister of the father, also means the sister of the mother. So therefore, that is how we are interpreting that according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says, no, it makes more sense that when you're talking about the prohibition related to father, we talk about the father's wife. That's where we're talking after the father dies, of course, because otherwise it would be under the existing prohibition of Eshes Ish, of a woman who's married. So that is what we're talking about. So he says that Ervas Aviv talks about the father's wife that he's not allowed to have relations with. So that's our argument. So Toshma, 5 lines down from the top, Vayikach Amram es Yocheved do daso. So it says that Amram married Yocheved, his aunt. So that is his father's sister. So this kind of proves this proves Rabbi Akiva's shita, because it's according to Rabbi Akiva, his father's wife is who's prohibited by Aviv. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it's his father's sister who's prohibited. Well, then how could Amram marry Yocheved? If he's a ben Noach, not Jewish, right, yet, because before Matan Torah, he couldn't marry his father's sister. Levi, he couldn't marry his father's sister. So then how is that allowed? So, my love doda so minha aim, doesn't this mean that it was his father's sister, and his father and his aunt had the same mother? Lo, no, not necessarily. Doda so minha av, that it was true that Amram had this, that Amram's father had the same Amram's father was related to Yocheved as brother and sister through the same father, but not through the same mother. And we said that when it comes to the non-Jews, the relationship from the mother is what counts, not the relationship of the father, right? So as the sister relationship is only prohibited through the father. So that doesn't prove it. Tashma, come and listen. V'gam amana achosi bas avihi, achlo bas imi. Avraham is explaining to Avimelech, right? Avimelech is mad. He says to Avram, why didn't you tell me that this woman is prohibited, that she is your wife? You told me that she is your sister, and that made me take her as a wife, and that is not, got me into trouble. And Avram says, well, she really is my sister, right? She is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. Now, why is he mentioning the daughter of my father, not the daughter of my mother? Mikal de basa aim asura, because if she would be the daughter of my mother, then she would be prohibited, right? So therefore, that proves the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, right? So the tisbara achoso, but the problem with that, well, if you're going to take Avraham's explanation on surface level, the challenge is that Sarah was not really his sister at all, right? Sarah was not his sister. Bas achiv havai, she was his niece. She was his brother's daughter, not his father's daughter. So v'kevan dehachihu lo shna min ha'av v'lo shna min ha'em. Well, if that's the case, if she's a niece, Jewish people are even allowed to marry their niece. That's not an issue. So therefore, it wouldn't make a difference whether why is Avraham bothering to give an explanation that, well, she's from my father, but not from my mother. What difference does it make? Practically speaking, so it would be from the same mother. She would still be permitted. So the answer is because lo shna min ha'av, lo shna min ha'em, sharia, she'd be permitted. Ella hasam hachi kamarle. This is what he was saying. Kurva da'achos isli bahada me'aba velo me'ima. The answer is he was just telling Avimelech, here's just the reality. I wasn't lying to you. Not that it makes a difference whether she's prohibited or permitted to me to marry, just so that you should know she does have a family relationship with me. It is a relationship that she has the same a relationship from the father, but not a relationship through the mother. So that's what he's explaining. Okay, Toshma, come and listen. Why is it that Adam Harishon did not marry his own daughter? Right? He had a daughter. He had Cain. He had a daughter. And Adam Harishon did not marry his daughter. The answer is so that Cain could marry his sister. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki amarti olam chesed yiboneh. Right? Because I said that the world is created with chesed. So halach lav hachi asira. So if it wasn't for the fact that the whole purpose of Cain, the whole purpose is that so the world will be rebuilt, Cain would have been prohibited to marry his sister, right? This was a special allowance under the circumstance. Cain can marry his sister. So therefore, what you see is that he would be prohibited.
Yeah, but the Zion mitzvahs weren't even written then. What is it?
Why weren't the Zion mitzvahs written then? They were written in the time of. They were written in Perek Beis, right? Perek Beis, Adam Harishon is given that pasuk. Right? It was that Vayitzav. He says it gives him the whole thing from the moment he commanded him from the pre-Eitz Sagan lo sochel. That was the pasuk that tells us of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Remember, right? So Adam Harishon got commanded right away. That was the very first, almost like the first thing Hashem told him. Here's the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So he had them, right? So his sister would have been usher in any event. So you see from here that Ben Noach is usher with his sister, like Rabbi Eliezer says, not like Rabbi Akiva says. So the answer is no, Kevan dishtari ishtari. According to Rabbi Akiva, what we're saying is, once it was permitted for Cain to marry his sister, that became the way that it goes forever. That became no problem, that the non-Jews are able to marry their sister, and it isn't a prohibition, even like Rabbi Akiva says. Okay, so Amar Rav Huna says kusi mutar bebito. A kusi is permitted to, according to since we're talking about this issue of Adam Harishon marrying his daughter, so a kusi is allowed to marry his daughter. Ve'im tomer ma lo nosa Adam esbito. So if a kusi is allowed to marry his own daughter, non-Jews are allowed to marry his daughter, so then why didn't Adam Harishon marry his daughter? As we said, so that Cain would be able to marry his sister. Mishum olam chesed yiboneh, because Hashem is creating a kindness to Cain so that he can get married and build the world. Ve'ikad de'amri, and there are those who say Amar Rav Huna, kusi aser bebito. There are those who learn that no, a kusi is prohibited to marry his daughter. Teda, you should know, shelo nasa Adam esbito. Because, how do you know that? Because Adam Harishon did not marry his daughter. Velohi, but that is not the case. Hasam hainu taima, the reason why Adam Harishon didn't marry his daughter is kadei sheyisa kindness achoso, so that Cain would be able to marry his sister, mishum de'olam chesed yibam, because of olam chesed yibaneh. Okay, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, Eved muter be'imo, an Eved Kanani. Okay, so an Eved Kanani has a special halacha. He's not Jewish first. Then, when he gets bought by a Jew and acquired, he has to go to the mikvah, and he becomes a quasi-Jew, right? He's obligated in certain mitzvos, but he's an Eved Kanani. But he's not completely Jewish, but he's quasi-Jewish. But since he goes through a partial conversion, the relationships that he has with his former family are erased. So therefore, an Eved muter be'imo, an Eved is allowed to marry his mother, mutter bebito, and can marry his daughter because they're no longer related after the conversion. Yotza miklal kusi uleklal Yisrael lo ba. Now we said that as far as being a Jew, so once a person converts, becomes a Jew. It could really be the case by any convert, but it isn't, because when it comes to any convert, once you become a Jew, we say, well, if it was prohibited for you to get married to these relatives while you were not Jewish, we're not going to say now that you're Jewish, you are permitted to those relatives. So therefore, you remain prohibited, midrabanan, from marrying those relatives.
I don't understand. Is he a yid or is he not a yid?
Oh, but that's the point here, right? He's in between. So he's not a non-Jew anymore. So he's not related to any of those previous relatives. But he's not a Jew. So all of the rabbinic prohibitions don't fall on him yet. Therefore, an Eved is this one status, this zone in the middle, and he's still permitted to marry his mother and his daughter. Okay, does that make sense? What's his status? The answer is he's in the gray zone.
Right.
Okay. Ki Asar Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Dimi came from Israel. He said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Ben Noach sheyichad shivcha liyavdo. Let's say a Ben Noach, a non-Jew, and he takes a female slave, and he decides this female slave is going to go get paired up with my male slave. Okay. Uba aleha. Then he changes his mind, and he has relations with this female slave. Okay. Nerag aleha. So now he gets killed. Why? Because he has. Well, we're going to see what the prohibition is. So me'emos. At what point? Remember, they don't have a marriage process. So at what point does the attachment between the slave man and the slave woman become a relationship such that if this non-Jew has relations with this person, then they're violating the isser of having relations with a husband-wife? So the answer is Amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman says, "Midikaru la revisa diplanya." From the time that the people of the city call the slave woman the girl of this slave, right? In other words, once they're living together, significant enough time, right? Once they're already, I guess, and it sounds like it's not just like having relations one time. It sounds like once they're already a couple, because at that point, then that bia is considered it's marriage from the non-Jewish perspective, and therefore, if the master has relations with the slave woman at that point, then he is violating the Gili Arayas prohibitions. Amar Rav Huna mishe par'a rosha b'shuk. The answer is once she keeps her hair covered in the marketplace. Apparently, that was the custom for married women, even non-Jewish married women. So therefore, they would keep their hair covered. So once she starts walking around with her hair covered, so then she considers herself married. So once that's the case, so then that's at what point it becomes a arayas problem for the owner. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Elazar said, Rabbi Chanina, Ben Noach shebal ishto shelo kedarka. If a Ben Noach, a non-Jew, has relations with his wife, shelo kedarka, right, with sodomy, so then he's chayiv. Then he's in violation of the Torah prohibition. Shenamar pasuk says v'davak, right, the responsibility, the mitzvah is that he's supposed to that the husband is supposed to leave his mother and cleave to his wife. Now, velo shelo kedarka. Shelo kedarka doesn't create a bond or a connection between the husband and wife. It's not to the woman's enjoyment, so therefore it's not considered to be a bia that creates that davak, and therefore it doesn't qualify. So Amar Rava says, but there shouldn't be a prohibition. There's no prohibition to having that kind of relations for a Jew. So therefore, is there such a thing and in which a Jewish person is allowed to have relations that way, but a non-Jewish person is not? Again, we have this constant problem that it should be that Jewish people have more prohibitions than non-Jewish people. So that would be a problem. Elamar Rava says, Ben Noach shebal eishes chaveiro shelo kedarka potter. Rather, what we're saying is, it's that a Ben Noach who has relations with the wife of his friend, shelo kedarka, that he's exempt for. Because there we're saying, my taima. Why is that? Because be'ishto velo be'ishes chavero v'davak velo shelo kedarka. Right? He's supposed to only have relations with his wife, and he didn't. But it's only considered relations if it is regular relations, not shelo kedarka. So if he has shelo kedarka relations with not his wife, that does not count. Whereas by a Jew, that does count. Now Tosfos asks, we know that there seems to be a prohibition against shelo kedarka also by Jews. Why is it that it says in this Gemara that is permissible? Tosfos says, and it's a whole discussion in Rishonim, but Tosfos says there's his just close to delo asir el she'osekach tadir. It's only a prohibition if the reason you're having bia shelo kedarka is in order to avoid a pregnancy, because that is the problem. Because the mitzvah is prurevu. Then you're being mevatel the mitzvah. That's the problem. Yes, that's considered a problem. However, on occasion, right? So then it's not problematic. Right? It's only if it's going to be all the time. Okay? Amar Chani, that's Tosfos Shita anyway. Amar Chanina, Ove Kochavim Shehikas Yisrael, Chayv Misa. If a non-Jew hits a Jewish person, he's Chayv Misa. Shnamar, as the pasuk says, Vayifin Kovako Vayira Ki Ein Ish Vayachas Mitzri. Moshe Rabbeinu, he looks both ways and he sees that there's nobody around, and then he kills the Egyptian, right? Why? Because the Egyptian was hitting the Jew. So he's chayav misa. V'amar Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chanina says, "Hasoter lo oshel Yisrael kilu soter lo oshel shchina." He says, somebody who smacks the cheek of a Jewish person, right, is as though he slaps the shchina. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "Mukash Adam Yala Kodesh." Somebody who hits a Jewish person who's called an Adam, right? It says Mokesh Adam. Somebody who smacks a person is like he is attacking the Shechina, right? It's as though he's slapping the Shechina. Magbia Avdo Shabbos Simon. So this is going to be Magbia Avdo Shabbos Simon. We're going to talk about these three things. Amar Reish Lakish says, Hamakbia Yodo al Chavera. Somebody who raises his hand against another person. We're talking about Jews also. Somebody who raises his hand against another Jew. Afal Pishalo Hiko. Even if you don't hit him, Nikra Rasha, you're called a wicked person. Shinamar the pasuk says, Vayomer LaRasha Lamata Kareyecha. When the two Jews were hitting each other in Mitzrayim, so he told one, why are you hitting your friend? Right? It doesn't say lama haikisalo never. It doesn't say why did you hit your friend. It says ela lama take. It means why will you hit your friend? Right? He caught him in the act, about to hit his friend. He said, why are you going to hit your friend? Afal pishalo hiko. Even though he wasn't going to be hit, nikra Rasha, he's called a wicked person. Right? He says to the Rasha. So he told him that he's a Rasha, even though he hasn't actually hit his friend yet. Ziri Amar Rabbi Chanina Nikra Chote. Ziri says in the Rabbi Chanina he's called a sinner. Shenemar v'imlo lakachti b'chazaka uksiv v'tihi chatas hanarim gedola meod. This is the children of Eli in the Beis Hamikdash. When people would come to bring their korbanos, they came and the Kohanim are entitled. They decided that they're going to grab the piece that they want from whoever was bringing a korban, and they did it by force. So basically, they threatened people, and it says that it was these individuals were great sinners because they were they were taking advantage of their position in the Beis Hamikdash. They were called great sinners for that. So Rav Huna Amar Tikotzetz Yodo. They deserve somebody who hits his friend should get his hand cut off. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Zro Rama Tishaver. Right, want somebody who raises his hand, it should be broken. Well, whether that is literal, or he's saying that that's the deserving punishment, right? That is not based and doesn't do that generally. However, Rav Huna cuts Yoda. Rav Huna actually did that, right? There was a person who was continuously hitting people, and Rav Huna cut his hand off. So we said that we have give based in loose authority to exact punishments that are not within the Torah's boundaries when necessary. So even Rav Huna was able to do that.
That was after he hit him, they cut off his hand?
Yeah, it sounds like
so he wasn't even considered a right. It was just that was...
This is the punishment, yeah. But it sounds like this is somebody who was a repeat offender, or whether, he was a consistent bully or something, right? There's Ella Kvura. Somebody who hits his friend, there's nothing, or at least raises his hand against his friend, there's no remedy for that other than getting buried, right? He's got to die. Shenemar's pasuk says, Ve'ish zeroa lo aretz. Somebody who is a man of the hand, of the arm, he goes to the ground. That the rule about people who want to own land is that you should be somebody who is strong. Somebody who owns land needs to be strong because you got to defend it. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "V'yisro lo haaretz." It's also the same pasuk. That's why we're quoting that. So a person who owns land has got to be able to keep all the trespassers off. Has got to be able to take care of it. So a landowner has a lot of responsibility. He has to be a strong person. Reish Lakish, my dichsiv. What does it mean when the pasuk says? Oved ad maso yisbal lechem. Somebody who works his land will be satisfied from bread. Im osa adam atzmo ke'eved la'adama means that if somebody makes himself like a slave to his land, so then yisbal lechem, then he's going to have enough bread to satisfy him. Im lav, but if you don't, lo yisbal lechem, you're not going to have enough bread to satisfy you. Ve'amar Reish Lakish further says, Oved kochavim Shabbos chayv misa. If a non-Jew keeps Shabbos, so he's chayv misa. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, V'yom v'layla lo yishbosu. Right? It says by a non-Jew that by day and by night he should not rest. Right? You're supposed to. Now the pasuk is actually in Noach. It says that after the flood, Hashem promises the seasons will not rest, meaning all the seasons ceased during the flood. And Hashem says from now on, the seasons of the year are going to be continuous. But it can also be read literally about a person, Ben Noach, during the day and night. He shouldn't stop working for the day and night. V'amar mar as harshalah and zuhi misa son. So he says that this warning that is when the Torah says to a non-Jew, it doesn't say the punishment is misa, right? As we said, once the Torah says it's prohibited, we know the chiyuv is misa.
I don't understand. Avodas kochavim, it's chayav misa anyways, without whether he works, whether he doesn't work. Why are we saying he doesn't work an entire day?
But why is keeping Shabbos avodah zarah?
No, he's saying avodas kochavim. Avodas kochavim shavach, right? Isn't that
No,
chayav misa?
an oved kochavim, a non-Jew, right? A non-Jew who keeps Shabbos is chayav misa. Right.
I read it. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was somebody.
Not an over. Right. If he worships idols on Shabbos, he's chayv misa. That he is somebody who is a idol worshiper who keeps Shabbos. Right. Guy decides he's going to be a Seventh-day Adventist. Sounds like he's going to rest on Shabbos. He's chayv misa.
No, it says it here. An Eved Chachamim.
Yes, a non-Jew.
Right. But an idolater.
Yes, he's an idolater. He's not Jewish.
Right.
So he keeps Shabbos. He's chayv misa for keeping Shabbos. Now, when we call him an idolater, so you're going to say he's chayv misa already for the idolatry that he's performing. Right, but that is what that's the word we always call a non-Jew. A non-Jew we just call him an idolater.
But he
would be chayav misa if he was really worshiping avodah zarah. Yes. Right. So he's not that. It sounds like that isn't the crime he's committing.
Why specifically for keeping Shabbos? Because he's resting.
Because the pasuk says yom v'layla lo yishpos, right? Not supposed to. He's not meant to be resting. Amar Ravina afilu sheni b'Shabbos. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Shabbos. It can be on a Monday, right? If he doesn't, because it just says he shouldn't take 24 hours off. He's got to do some malacha, right? Velich sheva gabe zayin mitzvah. So why isn't it one of the seven sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach? Sheva mitzvah Noach doesn't include don't keep Shabbos. So why not? Ki kachoshev sheva al taseh kum aseh lo kachoshev. Because all the sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach are things that you should not do, and this is something you should do, right?
Work.
Right, work. Right? You have to work. That's a positive. These rest of Sheva Mitzvot are negative. So the question is going to be, V'ha dinin kum asehu v'kachashiv. What about making courts? Making courts is a positive, so why is that counted? So the answer is, it's a kum aseh v'shev al tasaninu. It's two parts. It is both don't do injustice and also to make a court. It's both of those things included together, and it gets included for the don't part, not for the do part. For Rabbi Yochanan says, Torah, a non-Jew who learns Torah, chayav misa, he is chayav misa. Shenemar's pasuk says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha. Right? The Torah, Hashem Moshe gave us the Torah, it is our inheritance. Lanu morasha v'lo lahem. It's our inheritance, it's not theirs. Okay, v'lichshevei gabe sheva mitzvos. Why don't we count it as one of the sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach? Mandamar morasha, according to the opinion who says that morasha means it's an inheritance, migzol kagazole, because he's stealing. It's our inheritance and he's stealing, so it's already counted in the Sheva Mitzvot B'nei Noach. Mandamar me'orasa, the one who reads the word as me'orasa, it is our marriage to Hashem. The Torah is our marriage contract with Hashem. Dino kinara ha'me'orasa de baskila. So then it's like a non-Jew having relations with a nara ha'me'orasa who is Jewish, which we said was chayiv skila. So I guess the nafkamina, the difference might be if he learns Torah, whether he's chayiv skila or he's chayiv sayif, right? Because it could be chayiv skila perhaps. Meisvei. But here's the question. Rabbi Meir Omer Meir said, Minayin shafilo v'kochavim v'osik b'torah shu k'kohen gadol. How do we know if you've got a non-Jew who learns Torah, he's like a kohen gadol? That's a great thing when non-Jews should learn Torah, right? Shenemar's pasuk says, Asher yasa osam ha'adam v'chai bohem, that a human being should follow the ways of the Torah and live in them. Kohanim v'leviim v'yisraelim lo nemar. It doesn't say Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim should learn Torah. Ela ha'adam. It says a human being. It says that, it doesn't matter who you are. Any human being, as long as you learn Torah, it elevates you to the highest levels. So that shows you an idol worshiper can also learn Torah. There you see, it shouldn't be an idol worshiper, right? If he's at the highest level of a Kohen Gadol. It's a non-Jew. This is the answer is that a Kohen is this, I'm sorry, the Ovei Kochavim is learning the mitzvos, the Sheva mitzvos, the mitzvos that apply to him. Right? And so does that mean that he only learns things that apply to him? He could learn anything that is basically for the positive benefit, any learning that he does for the benefit of improving himself and for learning, that's great. But you have throughout history these Christians who would learn in order to be able to attack Jewish beliefs. That is where the chiyuv of misa is. That's where the death sentence is.
Like the Argentinian president, when he got up and he gave it to our Torah.
There you go. That's he's a good person, right? Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says, Af hadam minachai. Right? Rabbi Chanina also said that the other one of the Shav mitzvahs in Noach is blood from a living animal, right? He says it's also included. Tanar Rabbanan. The pasuk says, Ach basar b'nafsho damo lo sochelu. So it says that anything that the flesh is in it, its blood, the flesh is in its, the blood is in its soul, right? You cannot eat its flesh, meaning while it's still alive, right? That's the prohibition of eating a limb of a live animal. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says, Af hadam min achai. It's also prohibited to eat the blood that comes from a living animal while the animal's still alive. My time of the Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Why does Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel learn that? Kari be basar benafsho lo sochel and damo benafsho lo sochel. You have to put the comma in the right place. And if you put the comma in the right place, you can read the pasuk as two separate phrases. The animal that's flesh while it's still alive, and the animal while it's blooded and it's still alive. You should not eat both of those things. For Rabbanan, when the Rabbanan say, what do you do with that? Why is it talking about the blood and the meat? And why is the blood in that pasuk at all? That's to tell me that it is permitted. Aver min achai is not an issue by shrutzim, by these creepy crawly, I guess the grasshoppers and things that are kosher, right? So those, there isn't an issue. Why? Because the blood is indistinguishable from the meat of those animals, right? There's not like a separation between the blood and the animal. I'm not exactly sure on this, not clear in my head itself, but the blood and the meat are the same function, I guess, in these animals, whereas the blood and meat are separate in animals. I'm not sure exactly how that works biologically, but that's how they're reading the pasuk.
Even daging, we don't.
Correct. Blood and fish is in the same kind of a category. It only applies to animals where the blood is a prohibition. Kayotze badavar ata omer. Also, in a similar sense, it says rak chazak levilti achol hadam ki adam hu nefesh. The pasuk that tells us Jewish person not to eat blood, right? You should be strong, right? Don't eat the blood because the blood is the soul, right? So. Do we take this out, Olive? We include this phrase or take that phrase out? Wait 1 second, he says over here. Yeah, we take that out. So we skip to the end of the parentheses. For Rabbanan, hahu ledam hakaza, haneshama yotzebo. Right, the Rabbanan explain that phrase is talking about the prohibition of eating blood is the blood of hakaza, right? The blood of hakaza is the blood which comes out of the animal which has the life blood of the animal in it. So, hu de'asa lamali. So we're going to say, how do I read that? Rabbanan hahu ledam hakaza shenashama yotze bohu. That's the blood where the soul comes out of. That's how we read that. So lama li lemichtav livnei Noach v'lama li lemishnei besinai. So why is it that I've got to write that the blood is prohibited to a ben Noach, and then I write again that the blood is prohibited when it comes to Har Sinai. For the Jews also, it says also that the Jews should eat blood. Why do I need the same commandment written twice? Kid Rabbi Yossi, like Rabbi Yossi said, Rabbi Chanina. Dam Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina says, Kol mitzvah shnemar livnei Noach v'nishnis besinai lazeh v'lazeh nemra. Anytime you have a mitzvah that's written by the Bnei Noach, the Bnei Noach are told it, and then it's written again by Har Sinai, so then it's a mitzvah that both Jews have and non-Jews have. Livnei Noach v'lo nishnes besinai. If I've got any mitzvah that is commanded to non-Jews, right, before Matan Torah, but it's not said again at Har Sinai, so then Li Yisrael Nemra v'lo b'lim Noach, then it goes to the Jews, not to the non-Jews. It sounds like it should be the opposite, because was told to the non-Jews. Why does it only belong to the Jews? We're going to see that in a second.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we said before that we were talking about relations. We said, how could something be usher to...
That's what we're going to say in a moment. So,
right. So why do we need this pasuk to learn that out? Why do we have to say it in both places?
No, the question is, why do we say it in both places?
Right.
The answer is because we would never presume something is only usher to non-Jews. Right? So by writing it twice, it tells us that it applies to both Jews and non-Jews. If you write it once, it must apply only to Jews.
Oh, so you mean even if...
Exactly, right? And that's the point, right? In other words, the way that it would say it was only told to the non-Jews. And so then if it's only told to the non-Jews, that doesn't make sense. Why would it be only that? The answer is, because you can't only tell it to the non-Jews, that wouldn't make sense. As you said, we learned before, you can't have something that's also by non-Jews but mutter to Jews. Therefore, we flip it and say if it was only written once, then it winds up belonging to the Jews, not to the non-Jews. Va'anu ein lanu ela gid hanoshe, right? The only example of that applies to gid hanoshe, right? Where it's not written again in the Torah. It's only it's only written before Matan Torah, and therefore non-Jews don't have a prohibition of eating the gid hanoshe. Only Jews do. V'alibed Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Mar, Kol Mitzvah Shenemar Livnei Noach V'Nishnis B'Sinai Lezev V'Lezed Nemra. Says, but one side, according to Rabbi Yehuda says that call any mitzvah that it's written to B'nai Noach and then it's written at Har Sinai, it goes to both Adarabba. It should be the opposite. Midishnishnis B'Sinai LeYisrael Nemra V'Lo Livnei Noach. Why don't we learn it the other way and say that if it was repeated at Har Sinai, then we're basically saying we're taking it away from the non-Jews and giving it to the Jews. So the answer is Midi Isne Avodas Kochav B'Sinai Ve'Ashkechan De'onash Ov De Kochav Milave. The answer is because at Har Sinai in the Aseret Dibros, the Jew we're told don't worship idols, right? So and we're told the non-Jews are worshiping idols and they get punished for that, which means that the non-Jews must have that prohibition still standing, and it's told again at Har Sinai. Well, if it's being told at Har Sinai and what's being told at Har Sinai only applies to Jews, then how could non-Jews later on be punished for avodah zarah? So the answer is, even though it's written in the Aseret Dibros at Har Sinai, it still applies to non-Jews. So you see those things that are written both before and at Har Sinai apply to both Jews and non-Jews. Shema mina lazev lazen nemra. Okay. So this is what Brian's point is ahead of us already. So it says that anything which is told to Bnei Noach but not repeated at Har Sinai, so then it's being told to the Jews and not to Bnei Noach. Now, Adarabba, it should be the reverse. Midelo nishnis b'Sinai, if it was given to the non-Jews and then wasn't given to the Jews again, livnei Noach nimra v'lo Yisrael. So it should go to the non-Jews, it shouldn't go to the Jews. So this is Brian's point. Leka midam Yisrael shari v'lo v'kachav maser. We don't have anything that a Jew is allowed to do and non-Jews not allowed to do. That doesn't make sense. So v'lo, what are you talking about? It's not true. I'll show you a mitzvah that only applies, a prohibition that applies to non-Jews, and Jews are allowed to do it. What is that? V'arei yifas toar. Right, the Yifas Toar, go to war and you capture a Yifas Toar. A non-Jew captures a Yifas Toar is chayev is ishes ish. She's married, can't have relations with her. But a Jewish person who captures a woman in Yifas Toar, so he can marry her. Right, even if she's married before, doesn't matter. So Hasa Mishum Delav B'nei Kivush Ninu. That's not because non-Jews are not permitted, are permitted to are more prohibited. The issue is that in order to become a Yifas Toar, you have to be engaged in a war in which you're conquering something. Non-Jews are not authorized to be involved in such a war. Only Jews can be involved in a war that's authorized. Therefore, they can be in a circumstance to capture somebody and make them a Yifas Toar. A non-Jew, since they're never authorized to be in war in that way, never come to a situation where the woman becomes a Yifas Toar. She just is a captive. She's just a hostage. So that's not the same thing. What about a circumstance where a Jew steals less than a pruta? We said that if a non-Jew steals less than a pruta, so then he is chayev, he's in violation. But a Jew who steals less than a pruta from a Jew, so that he's not chayev. So hasa mishum delav b'nei mechilon inhuis. That's not that it's permitted to steal less than a pruta. It's just that if a Jew steals less than a pruta from another Jew, he's going to let him go. It's still prohibited, as we had a couple pages ago. It's just that he's going to let him off the hook. Non-Jew steals from another non-Jew. He's not going to let him off the hook because he's not going to be mochel. But nevertheless, it's still prohibited. So there is no such thing as something that's permitted to a non-Jew and permitted to a Jew and prohibited to a non-Jew.
Except going to war and conquering land.
That's a mitzvah, right? That's not a prohibition.
I mean, you're right, but
there are lots of mitzvahs that apply to Jews that don't apply to non-Jews.
Right, we're permitted to do it. It's usher for
not permitted. It's a mitzvah. We're obligated, right? If there are certain circumstances, you go to war as a mitzvah. Right. Okay, so we said kol mitzvah shenemra libnei Noach, any mitzvah that was given to Bnei Noach, v'nishnis b'Sinai, and then it gets repeated Har Sinai lazev lazad nemra. It goes to both. Veharei. Mila, what about bris Mila? Shenemar livnei Noach, right? Bris Mila was given to non-Jews, right? Avram before Har Sinai was told to do a bris milah, right? Dichsev v'ata es brisi tishmor v'nishnes b'Sinai, and then we see it again after Har Sinai. Ubiyom hashmini yimol, that you're supposed to be able to do it. So Yisrael nemra v'lo livnei Noach. And in the end, it belongs to the Jews. It's a mitzvah to Jews, not to non-Jews. So the answer is Hahu lemisrei Shabbos hu da'asa. The pasuk that tells me about the bris milah being on the 8th day is not coming to tell me a new mitzvah of doing bris milah. That's just to tell me that it must be done on the 8th day, even if it's Shabbos. Therefore, it's really only said once, and it's only said once. It applies to Jews, not to non-Jews. Okay, and because it says bayom va'afilu b'Shabbos. Okay, what about another mitzvah? Varei pirya v'rivya. What about having children? Shne'amar livnei Noach tichsiv atem pru revu v'nishnes b'Sinai lechem or lehem shuvu lechem lo alechem. So it says that by before Matan Torah we're told pru revu, and then when the Jews are separated from each other from their wives during Matan Torah, afterwards Moshe Rabbeinu comes back and says, "Okay, everybody go back to your tents." So the mitzvah to go and be with your wives. So Yisrael nemar v'lo livnei Noach, and nevertheless this mitzvah is now a mitzvah that Jews have. It's not one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So the answer is Hahu lekol davar shebeminyan sarich. So he says minayin acher lahatirohu de'asa. So he says that's because, right? This is to tell us that anytime something has an expiration, an amount, right? Nevertheless, there has to be a statement permitting it. Meaning, Moshe Rabbeinu was told the Jews are supposed to separate from their wives for 3 days. It should expire, that prohibition should expire automatically after 3 days. But in the end, it needed, instead, Hashem had to give the command to say, now it's permitted. So it's showing us a general rule that even if something is prohibited for a certain amount of time, you need to be able to have a command to be able to return in any event. It doesn't automatically expire on its own. That's why they were told you can go back to your wives, because the expiration, you would presume the expiration would be automatic. It is not. So therefore, it is not to tell us. So therefore, the only time you have the mitzvah of Puravu is before Matan Torah. Therefore, it applies to Jews and not to non-Jews. If that's true, Kol chada v'chada nami neim mishum milsa isni. So he says, if that's true, then basically every mitzvah that you take a look where they're repeated, there are additional details given to the Jews. So then I can explain away and say that really the second time it's only mentioned so that I can give you additional details, and really the main mitzvah was given before, so therefore it applies to Jews and not to non-Jews. So, Hachikamar, this is what we mean. Ashara mihader umisnaba lamali. We're asking, why is it that we had to return and repeat the prohibition in the first place? The only time that the prohibition is not repeated is by gid hanasha. V'alibed Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda says, hani nami lo isni, hani isni. So then in these circumstances, so the mitzvah of Mila and Pru-Ravu, right, then they were not, right, so they're not mentioned at Har Sinai because they were only being able to be given for these additional commandments, right? But the Isser of Gid Hanasha is lo itni klal, is not mentioned at all, right? That was not mentioned.
It is mentioned twice, by the way. It's also mentioned Parshas Noach.
Yeah, but that's also, I guess, before Matan Torah. Right, correct.
So it's not that it's mentioned only twice. One has to be mentioned after
Matan Torah. That is correct. It's a good point to make.
Because
right?
you said Gid Hanasha is mentioned in Bereshit, so I thought maybe if it's mentioned twice in Bereshit, that would also count as.
Yes. No, it doesn't seem. It seems like. Yes, I know it's true. That is once for the mitzvah, potentially once for a bracha, but it's not. Again, there's no mitzvah afterwards after Matan Torah where it is specified again. Okay, so now, Ibois Ema, or else another explanation that I'll give you is Mila Meikar Avraham hu Dimnas here lei rachmana. The answer is that unlike other the Sheva mitzvahs in Noach, the reason why Mila only applies to Jews is because it was given to Avram Avinu in the first place. It wasn't given to Adam or Noach, like the other mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So therefore, that's why it's only a Jewish mitzvah. The Ata is brisi tishmor. Ata v'zaracha acharecha l'dorosam. Right? You are supposed to guard my bris, you and your children after you for all generations. Which means it's only a mitzvah that was given to Avram, not to all b'nei Noach. So Ata v'zaracha in a shachrina lo. El me'ata. Well, if that's true, b'nei Yishmael l'chayvo. So why wouldn't then, if that's true, if it really applies to all of Avram's children, so Yishmael is also Avram's children, why shouldn't they be chayv in a bris? So the answer is Kibi Yitzchak Yikar l'chazera, because it says Yitzchak is the continuation of your seed. So therefore Yitzchak gets the commandment, not Yishmael. B'nei Esav l'chayvo. What about it? The children of Esav then, right? They're Yitzchak's children. So the answer is Be Yitzchak v'lo kol Yitzchak. It says some of Yitzchak's children will be from all of your brachas go to some of Yitzchak's children, not to all of Yitzchak's children. So maskifla, so that it applies to Yaakov, not to Esav. Maskifla Ravoshaya El Me'atif, that's true. B'nei Keturah lo lechayvu. Then what about the children of Keturah? Right after Sarah Imenu dies, Avram remarries a woman named Keturah. Some say it says Hagar is the same person, so he remarries Keturah and has more children. So then. The B'nai Keturah should be outside of Bris Milah, shouldn't be a chayav in Bris Milah because they're not Yitzchak's children, right? They're not the continuation through Yitzchak, not through any of Keturah's children. But Hamar Rabbi Yossi bar Abin, but didn't Rabbi Yossi say the name of Rabbi? The Rabbi Yossi bar Abin say V'itema Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina as Brisi Hefar l'Rabos B'nai Keturah that my commandments. Right, an Aral Zachar, Asher Lo Yimos Basar, so an Aral Zachar who doesn't get a bris milah, then his nefesh is going to be cut off because he has reneged on my bris. And so why is it saying that extra phrase? The answer is L'Rabos B'nai Keturah, to tell us that even the B'nai Keturah are supposed to have a bris milah. So therefore, it's clear it's not just Yitzchak's children, it's just not Yishmael. It's Yitzchak's children and all of Keturah's children, just not Yishmael. Are chayav and bris milah. So Rav Yehuda Amarav Adam Harishon Lo Huter. So the B'nai Keturah are also involved in the mitzvah, right?
Yishmael got a bris. No? Didn't he get a bris?
Yishmael got a bris, yes.
At 14 or something.
At 13, at 13, right?
I guess that makes sense.
Right, so it's saying only the children of Keturah themselves were chayav in a bris milah, but But he says, but that only applies to the children of Keturah, not to their continued offspring, which is not how I read the Gemara the first time. And I had seen someplace that they learned this Gemara to mean that actually the children of Keturah are chayav in bris milah. The only thing is we don't know who they are. And then from there we actually have a tradition that the Bnei Keturah married into Yishmael's family, and so. Anyway, so there's that. In any event, the Bnei, so that's why the Jewish people have this mitzvah, not any of the other offspring of Avram Avinu. Amar Yehuda Marav. Adam Arisha lo huter lo basar la'achila. Adam Arisha was not allowed to eat meat. Dechsiv, the pasuk says, lachem yiyeh la'achla u'lekol chayas haaretz v'lo chayas haaretz lachem. Right? It says, this is, I'm giving you all the asev, everything that grows, all of the trees in the gan can be eaten. And then it says, Ulechol chayas aretz, ulechol ofer shamayim, ulechol romeis al haaretz, ashabo nefesh chayas, kol yerek asev la'achla, vayhichein. Right? And so it says, lachem, it says, they'll be to you, la'achla, ulechol chayas aretz, velo chayas aretz. Right? This is supposed to be, all the food is supposed to be given to you and to all of the animals of the earth. Right, but the animals of the earth, not to you. Ukeshabo b'nei Noach hitir lahem. Then when it came to the children of Noach, they became permitted to eat meat. The pasuk says, "Ki yerek esev nasati lachem." I have made animals like the vegetables of the field. As kol yachol lo yehei ever min achai noheg bo. Sorry?
I was going to ask the Rashi on Ben Keturah. How does it not include Yishmael? It sounds like
Keturah. Why is Yishmael not included in the Keturah? Where's that Rashi? B'nei Keturah also Shisha Shenol Avram Hein Atzman Lo Lechayvo V'nei Mahasha Delo Mal Avram Kol Banav Shahayu Lo Bechayav. Right, only those 6 themselves, not their offspring. But Avram was commanded to give a bris milah to all of them. Keturah, it says that she had 6 children, and that's not included in the Ishmael that was from before. Okay, so
And it said, it gave the reason before, right?
right. So Yishmael was not included for another. Yishmael's children not included for another reason.
But Keturahs were included.
Keturah's children themselves. Avram is commanded to give a bris milah to all of his children, but they don't have to continue that mitzvah on beyond.
Right, that's essential.
That's correct. That's what Rashi is saying. Okay, so where were we? Right? When Benoah came around, they were allowed to eat meat. That everything is given to you like the grass of the fields. Maybe the Isra of the prohibition of Aver min Achai doesn't apply to Bnei Noach. Talmud Lomar, Ach basar benafsho damo lo sachelu. That which is the flesh is in its nefesh, the blood you shall not eat. So that means only the meat is permitted, right? Not the meat while it's still alive. So therefore, Aver min Achai is prohibited. Yachol af l'shrotzim. So, right. So we're told that they're able to eat them. So Aver min Achai. So we said Aver min Achai is not prohibited by the non-Jews, but I'm sorry. Gina Nosha is not prohibited by the non-Jews, but Aver min Achai is prohibited. Yochel af l'shrotzim. I might think that this Aver min Achai prohibition also applies to shrotzim. Talmud Lomar, Ach. The pasuk Ach says that it doesn't apply to those animals that Aver min Achai does not apply to those animals where the basar and the blood are, I guess, in the same category.
Well, wouldn't that mean they have to salt their meat like we do? Would you assume that?
Only if it's a living animal, right? In other words, they can eat blood, right? They just can't drink blood while the animal is still alive, right? That's the problem, right? They can't take an animal, puncture a hole in it, get some blood out of it, and keep the animal alive, and keep drinking blood from it. That's what they can't do. Okay. Meisvei uredu bidgas hayam. Now, if what you're saying is that that Adam Arishan wasn't able to eat any meat. So, we're going to presume that eating meat doesn't mean literally meat, but it means any of the flesh of a living animal. That was what Adam Arishan was prohibited. But then why does it say that you shall rule over the fish of the sea? My lav lachila, what does it mean they rule over? It doesn't mean that he was allowed to eat it. He was allowed to eat fish. No, lemalacha, you use that fish for work. How can you use fish for work? What are fish going to do? So the answer is it could be. Keder Rachava, Debai Rachava, like Rachava did. Because Rachava asked the question, Hinhig Be'iza Veshivuta Mai, what would be the halacha if you were pulling a wagon using some kind of a fish and a goat? Right? So what if you, so I guess you'd have you'd be going along next to a canal and you'd have a goat pulling your wagon and a fish in the canal pulling the wagon, and they were working together. Is that a Kilayim question, right? That was his question. So you see that you can have fish, right? You guys can imagine a dog sledding team. You can have like SeaWorld, right? You have the dolphins pulling you along. So theoretically you could do it, right? Toshma. Ube'ova shemayim. So it says also in the birds of the heaven you shall rule over. My love, does that mean they could eat the birds? Lo lemalacha. No, again, to work, birds could work. Vovfos b'nei malacha nenu. How can birds do work for you? The answer is Kedebai Rabba bar Rav Huna, like Rabbi Rav Huna asked. Dosh be'avazin v'tarnagol. What if you have to muzzle an animal that is threshing for you? What if the animal that's threshing is a chicken or a goose? Right? Do you have to muzzle that? So again, it could be threshing, so it could be doing work for you. For Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, what about Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda? Tashma, come listen. B'chol chaya haromeses al aretz. So all of the animals that are crawling on the land, hahu la'asuye nachash. So that comes to include the snake, hudasa. Detanya, we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer. Chaval al shamash godol she'ava min olam. It's chaval that this great servant was destroyed from the world. The snake was originally a creature that could walk, and it was a creature that could talk. It was of higher intelligence, and then it got diminished. And it's a bad thing that happened, because Shalmali Niskal Nachash, if it wasn't for the fact that the Nachash got lowered, Kol Echad ve'Echad miYisrael Hayu Mizdamnin Lo Shnei Nachashim, everybody would have had 2 pet snakes. That would have been the way to go. You had 2 pet snakes, tovim, 2 good pet snakes. Echad mishagru l'tzafon, v'echad mishagru l'darm. You send one of them north. You send one of them south. Lahavilo sandal bonim tovim. You get some sandal bonim gems. Va'avonim tovos, and you get some shiny rocks, right? Some precious stones. Umargolios and pearls, right? So they were smart enough to perform functions and work independently, not like other animals, right? You could have sent the snakes on missions for you. So that would have been a really great deal. Every Jew could have had a couple of snakes going to work for them, and that would have been the way to go.
Rabbi Engel gave a shiur in Montreal years ago. He said it was like a human.
Yeah, it was like that, right?
It was a human.
Not only that, Ella shemafshilin ritzuatakas navo. You could put some kind of a strap under its tail, right? And they're very good with dirt, snakes. So you put some kind of a strap under its tail, and the snake would be able to clear the dirt away and know what was going to be fertile dirt that you could put in the garden, and what dirt needs to be cleared away and put in the ruined areas, right, that you're not going to use. Okay, Meisve. So there you see that snakes also could be put to work. That's the point. Meisve. Haya Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said, Adrisha Meisav began Aiden Haya. Vahayu Malach Yisharif Tzolin lo basar u'minasan lo yayin. He says that Adam Rishon was relaxing in Gan Eden, and the Malachim would grill some meat for him, and they would strain some wine for him. Hitzitz bo nachash v'ra b'chvodo. So the snake got very jealous of the whole situation, the circumstance. So therefore, that's when the Nachash rose up and set everything out of order, because he was very jealous of the treatment Arisha was getting. So 1 second, we just said that Arisha wasn't allowed to eat meat. Right. So how are the Malachim making you meat? So the answer is Hasam Basar Yor Mishamayim. That wasn't meat from an animal. That was meat that came out of Shemayim, right? It was, I guess, like have to ask the question, right? When there's these Israeli companies that are making they're growing the lab meats, right? So what is that? Is it kosher or not? So they said this meat comes out of Shemayim. So 1 second, mi'ika basar hayor min Shemayim. Is that really such a thing? There's meat that comes out of heaven. Is that really a thing? Yeah, there is. Kihad Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, the story of Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, Hava Kaza be'orcha, he was going on the way, Pagalo Hanach Aryusa Dehavuka Nahami La Pei. He said there was these lions, that were coming after him while he was that were in front of him. Amar, he said the pasuk ha-kefirim shu'agim l'tarif, that the young lions are roaring for their prey. Nechisu le'trei atmasa. So 2 pieces of meat fell out of the sky. As soon as he says this, chada achluha. So the lions ate one of the pieces of meat. The chada shavku, they left one of the pieces of meat. So I say, so he took the piece of meat. Ve'asla beis midrash, he went to beis midrash with the piece of meat. Boyala, he asked about it. Davar tamehu zeh o davar tor. Is this meat kosher or not? Right, came out of Shemayim. So I don't know, is it kosher or is it not kosher? So Amar Lei, so he said, "Ein davar ein tavar tameh yorei min Shemayim." Nothing that's non-kosher falls out of Shemayim. Everything comes from Shemayim is kosher.
Did he also in the Bava Mitzvah, the first time they got meat was also from Shemayim, was it not?
No, that was quail. They actually brought real quails.
Quail was later on.
The first time they never got meat. They got mun from Shemayim,
right?
And then they got quail, which was not from Shemayim, but they never had meat fall out of Shemayim.
Oh, I thought quail was a second.
Right, otherwise they would have answered. If he says meat comes out of Shemayim, yeah, there's a pasuk, right? That didn't happen. So, but
the man could take
any flavor, right? That you could do, right?
So you could explain that something from Shemayim.
Everything from Shemayim is kosher, right? Yeah. So okay, but Minei Reb Zera may Rabbi Yavo. So Zera asked Rabbi Yavo, Yardolo demus chamor mahu. What if the meat comes out like a donkey meat? Then what happens? Let's say like a dead donkey falls out of Shemayim. Could you eat that? Because it's a donkey and it's not kosher animal. So Amar Le Yarod Nala. He said you're a deranged Yarod. Right? I don't know what exactly Yarod is. So Amri Le Ein Davar Tamer Yorei min Shemayim. I just said nothing from Shemayim is not kosher. So I'm not quite sure whether that means that a donkey wouldn't fall out of Shemayim, right? Or it means that if a donkey came out of Shemayim, it would be kosher. So either way, but the bottom line is that was what I just said. What's the question? Rav Shimon Omer Af Ala Kisha. Rav Shimon says also the next part of Mishnah is that next thing that Ovdei Kochavim can't do is they can't do kishuf. They can't do sorcery. My time at the Rishon, as the Rishon says, Dichsev, as the pasuk says, Machshefa lo tichya. Somebody who's a sorcerer should not live. The Kosov, and it says, Kol shochev im behema mos yumas. Also says that somebody who lives with an animal should die. So therefore, to say this is a connection, right? Lo tichya, and should die. Kol sheyeshno bechlal, kol shochev im behema yeshno bechlal machshefa lo tichya. Anybody who's in the category of one prohibition is in the category of the other prohibition as well. So this is we'll stop here after a page and a half.
Perfect.
And that's what we'll
Beautiful.
stop.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.
Right.